A 14 successive home win at White Hart Lane saw Spurs blitz Watford by 4-0 as Mauricio Pochettino's Spurs refused to go away. We look back on that huge victory and preview Bournemouth to come in this week's e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! 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 Tottenham!
Hi guys, welcome back for another hour of talking all things Tottenham Hotspur. Please don't forget you can subscribe to the show as always via iTunes or Acast and get every brand new episode direct as it's released. You can of course follow us across all the usual social media platforms. We're on Twitter and Instagram at e_Spurs. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/e-Spurs page. We're also on YouTube, Pinterest and Tumblr. And for all the links to all e-Spurs platforms, you can head to our brand new website of www.e-Spurs.com. On the e-Spurs podcast tonight, we'll be talking about the 4-0 win over Watford. We'll be taking your questions and we'll be previewing Bournemouth to come Saturday lunchtime. What a show we've got in store. But before we talk all things Spurs tonight, let's introduce tonight's panel talking us through the next hour. We've got our regular guest with us, Jason here. Jason, how are you?
Very well, thanks mate. It's good to be back.
And good to have you back, Jason, on the show. We've got Ian with us. Ian, how are you?
I'm very well, Rick. Nice to welcome the two new guests to the show tonight and speak to you and Jason as always.
Looking forward to be a cracking show, Ian. And I'm pleased to say first up we've got Seb Stafford-Bloor. Seb is a freelance football writer, mainly for 442. Seb, how are you?
I'm good, Ricky. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. We're looking forward to it. It should be a cracking show. And finally, but no means least, we've got John Crace on the show. John, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks very much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Great. And let's stick with you for a second, John. Do you want to give your background and maybe affiliation to the club in terms of what you do for any guys that don't know out there? I can't believe they wouldn't know, John.
Well, my day job is as parliamentary sketch writer for The Guardian, but my longest serving passion is Spurs. I've been a fan since about 1966 when I was 10. I've been a season ticket holder for God knows how long, and I've written books about the club. And one you may know, Vertigo, One Fan's Fear of Success, which was the story of our 2010 or was it 2011 Champions League campaign. And I'm currently about to start writing another one about moving to the new ground.
Fantastic. And John, just out of interest, when is that book? When do you think that might be available to buy? When have you got an idea in terms of when that may be coming out?
Well, it sort of depends when Spurs decide to move, because at the moment they still haven't confirmed. I mean, ideally, if all goes to plan and we do move to Wembley next season, I will start writing come sort of July, August period. And then I'll sort of finish as we move into our new ground. So I'll finish writing sort of December next year. And so it should be around spring 2019.
Okay, fair enough. That's definitely something to look forward to. John, we're going to bring it back to you in a second. We want to get your thoughts on the game in a sec. Let's come round first to you, Jace. Pretty convincing victory, wasn't it, against Watford? What did you make of it?
Very, very convincing after what was probably a difficult opening 20 minutes. Thought Watford looked different to how I think we'd imagined them. We'd heard that their team was decimated, and it seemed strange to see a few of the old Spurs boys missing as well. But they seemed to come and want to give it a go, and caught us a little bit by surprise. And for those first 20 minutes, it was quite even. But once we got that breakthrough goal, from that moment on, it was one-way traffic, you know, for the 15 minutes or so either side of half time, and then it felt quite dull the last half hour, didn't it? There was none of this backs to the wall, there was no nail biting, no silly free kicks, no pushes in the back, and yeah, it wasn't very Spursy at all. And I much prefer these games where we're hanging on. It became dull in the last 30 minutes, and I think that says a lot for us. So much control on it that we only had to actually play for 30 minutes in the game, and we in 4-0 in 30 minutes, and that was a job done.
It really was. How dare you, Jason, say you feel dull being 4-0 up? How dare you? But I understand what you're saying. Ian, bringing it to you. I have to talk about this first. Dele Alli. He has had a hand in as many Premier League goals before turning 21 as Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard and David Beckham combined. Star in the making, isn't he?
Well, I'm going to turn this back like most sort of like managers do and answer a question with a question. Has there ever been a better young player as Dele Alli.
John, Seb, what do you guys think of it? What do you guys think very quickly on that?
Well, it depends how far you go back, really. I mean, Gaza was fantastic as a youngster, but I mean, he is a special talent. There is no denying that, and I mean, and the stats you've read out support that. You know, you just can't argue with the figures, actually.
It's frightening. It really is frightening. Ian, I have to ask you another guy as well. I mean, Dele Alli, for me, he is superstar in a making. I know we mustn't get carried away, but I mean, many questioned that first season to say, can he do it again? Well, not only is he doing it again, it's getting better, isn't it?
Yeah, can I just say that following on from I think what I said in the last week's pod, I think he's a superstar already. I genuinely do. I looked at his performance against Burnley, and you can always tell the really, really good players because they seem to be able to play the game in their own time frame. And Dele Alli's very, very, very quickly being able to do that at a very good level. And you just look at that goal he scored on Saturday. You know, I don't think you'll see any better than in the Premier League this year, to be honest. The way he sort of like picked the movement and then the finish was just sublime.
It was. I mean, but I also want to say that what's impressed me most is the way he'll have turned up for the tap-ins as well. Because a lot of his goals have been, like his goal against Swansea was just there from a couple of yards out. But he made the run, and he gets into spaces that just other players don't seem to see. And it's a long time since we've had a striker who can do that. I mean, he's actually not a striker; he's a number 10. Yeah. But he's still there on the 6-yard line, ready to take up hit home anything.
Now, sticking with you, John, I mean, another player who also at the moment is rising to the occasion is Heung-min Son. 18 goals, 9 assists, only 26 starts. Isn't he unbelievably underrated by some? Because he's in the form of his life right now, isn't he?
He certainly is. Though, I mean, I think it's going to be hard to him to stay in the side once. I mean, assuming that Kane's back, because you don't really want to disrupt the shape. And I mean, I still think of him as his best role at the moment as impact sub. The bloke who comes on at 60 minutes and just sort of runs at tired legs. I mean, you can't argue with his stats again. But the fact of the matter is that if you're going to play Dier, Alderweireld and Vertonghen at the back, and assuming either Rose or Davis on the left, Walker or Trippier on the right, and then you've got Dembele in the middle. And then if you're going to play Eriksen, Dele Alli and Kane, then there isn't really any room for him in the team. And I don't see how you can fit him in.
What do you think, Seb? Is there any way you can kind of play them all together?
I don't think so, Ricky. I think with regards to like the next game, I think all eyes now have to be on Wembley and Chelsea. And I know it's going to sound like I'm raining on everyone's parade a little bit with Son, but he's still, to me, someone that you can't necessarily trust that much against the very best teams, because like the strength in his game really is sort of dynamism, and as John just said there, sort of making the difference against tired legs. We've seen that loads of times this season, whether it be through a goal or something like his footwork against West Ham, which earned the penalty at the end. That's sort of traded off against what other more secure players bring, and sort of their effect on the kind of the overall integrity of the side. And he's still, I don't know. I mean, he's had a great week, but in a sense, has he really? I mean, he produced kind of the highlight moment against Swansea, of course, but was pretty bad in that game for 87 minutes. And he played very well on Saturday. But there's obviously a bit of a difference between playing well against Watford when you're 1-0 up against a side who kind of know they're safe already this season and have sort of checked out mentally, and then facing like a Chelsea at Wembley. It's just different, and he's kind of typically struggled in that kind of game. And so I don't know. I think you have to. I don't think he's in the sort of a nominal first 11 purely because I don't think he's quite as rounded as all those other options that Pochettino has at the top of his formation.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, he's scored 7 goals in his last 4 appearances. He's the first South Korean player to score more than 10 goals in a single Premier League season. I mean, I agree with you, Seb. It's interesting to see if he can step up in these big games. I mean, like you've just said, the Chelsea game, the Man United, the Arsenal to come. It will be interesting to see. It really will be. Bring it back around to you, Jace. Eric Dier, I mean, for me, he's back to that sensational form of last season. He's back in that pivot with Moussa Dembele. I mean, obviously at the disfortune of Victor Wanyama at the moment, who's injured. We'll have to wait and see whether he'll be fit for next Saturday. But again, Dier, phenomenal finish, wasn't it, for 2-0?
Yeah, fantastic goal, and unlike the one at Burnley, which I said wasn't due to him playing in midfield, that one certainly was. But it's interesting, going forward how we balance the side out, because if we're going to play with Eric Dier in midfield, which I'm more than happy to, it means you're leaving Wanyama out. It means you're going to a normal back four and things like that, and people have to work out how the 3-4-3 seems to be the preferred way of playing for most people. And if you're going to play 3-4-3, you can't play Eric Dier in midfield. So as good as performances are, it's the whole balance of the team that has to be right, and Watford at home is a very different balanced team to the challenges coming up towards the end of this month.
Yeah, it's a very.
But in fairness, don't take that as a criticism of Eric Dier, because he had an excellent game and it was an excellent finish. But like I say, it's the importance of that balance that you have to keep right with the side.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I say he completed 65 of the 71 passes he attempted, more than any other player. His goal hit the back of the net at 97 miles per hour. Ian, I feel like we've been here before with this whole Wanyama Dier debate. Very quickly, your take on it.
I think a lot depends on the opposition, because I think I've said before, this is a squad game, and I accept that we have our preferred first 11. But sometimes you have to adapt the playing staff to meet the challenges that the opposition provide you. And if Pochettino thinks that playing Dier and Dembele in the midfield is going to get us the result, then he plays those two. So I think a lot depends on who's available. I don't think you can deny that against Chelsea, especially at home, Wanyama had Kante in his pocket for near enough all the game, and I'd like to see that replicated at Wembley. But outside that, I think that we have to be mindful of the fact that it's a squad game, and we have to keep the squad interested, but we have to play the squad that sort of provides us with the best opportunities to win the game. A bit like Kieran Trippier. I thought that he was phenomenal on Saturday.
Yeah, he really, really was. He really, really was. Let's bring it on to him. John, coming to you. Kieran Trippier created more chances, won more tackles, and completed more crosses than any other player in the game. Kyle Walker, I know he's had a phenomenal season, but isn't it great to have someone to come in and, really rival him for that right-back spot?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the difference between, because I went down to Swansea midweek, and I mean, Kyle Walker was making those runs, but his crossing was abysmal. Several times he just sort of kicked it I don't know whether it was the adrenaline, he just sort of belted it miles over any advancing Spurs players. And Trippier does seem to have the knack of finding players, and I mean, he could have had 3 assists with no trouble in the Watford game. So I think that, far from just being a kind of stand-in for when Walker's feeling fatigued, I mean, Trippier must be in Pochettino's mind as his first choice at the moment.
Do you really think that, John? Do you think even when Walker, I mean, we say Walker, he seemed to have maybe rested him during the week, but you think really there's a battle on there for that right-back spot?
I think there really is. I mean, Walker has got more pace. I mean, there is no doubt about it. But I think that Trippier is probably as good a defender as Walker, because we all know that Walker can go, have his moments during a game. There's usually one Walker moment where, there's a sort of crisis point where he gets himself hopelessly out of position. I think kind of Trippier, and he often relies on his pace to get him out of trouble. I think Trippier's positional sense is excellent, and Trippier's decision making of when to go forward and when to make the run, and as I say, the final ball. I think on the basis of the last game, on the last couple of games actually, the Burnley game as well, he looked every bit as good as Kyle Walker. I mean, there used to be a time when I looked at the sort of starting sheet and thought, oh God, if only we had Walker. But now you kind of look at Trippier and you don't feel there's any weakness.
It is incredible. And I say 3 assists in his last 2 Premier League appearances versus Watford. Lights playing against them. Let's bring it on to you, Seb. Let's talk about him. Let's have a look at this for the moment. Spurs were just 4 wins away now from securing Champions League football for a second successive season under Pochettino. That shouldn't be overlooked, should it? I know obviously people are still looking at, maybe a possibility of the title, but Champions League for a second successive season, when you look at the money he's spent in comparison to the other managers, it's phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think a lot of people said last season that, like behind Leicester, of course, that Tottenham are really the beneficiaries of sort of the drop off in the sort of the usual top 4 sides. And I think it's hugely impressive that even though every team that realistically should be above Tottenham, they spend their summer either bringing in new managers or signing up to or beyond the £100 million worth of players, and Tottenham's continuity has been very smooth, and it's kind of, I don't know what this season, I'm a little bit conflicted about what I want from this season, because I can't really decide whether I want to emotionally buy into the title. I don't really think that's advisable after what it did to me last year, and I can't really decide whether I'm prioritising Arsenal top 4, whatever. But what I will say is it's just so, it's gratifying to watch kind of such consistency and to watch this sort of smooth progress, which hasn't relied on, a £30 million player playing in that position, a £25 million player playing in that one. It's just this sort of, it's evolution. And that's been, it's been very heartening, Ricky.
I'll bring it back around to you, Jace. I mean, we were told start of the season, Jace, that from our perspective, you've got to wait when City have Guardiola in place, when Man United have a Mourinho in place, this Spurs side will be lucky to get, top 5, top 6. But, even if we finish second, does that not just set a precedent of just how far this Spurs team have grown?
Yeah, it definitely does. We were told last year that we were only involved in the race, and in fact only really in the top 4 because of the failings of other sides, and so the fact that we are there and we're so far ahead of almost every other one of them other than Conte does say a lot for us. I mean, I'll be honest, I tipped Manchester United at the start of the season. I thought Mourinho in there, the players that they were bringing in, the money they'd spent, I thought Guardiola might struggle a little bit, but I didn't expect us to be the ones challenging Chelsea, and I thought we probably will have a battle on our hands to try and nick that spot. So without a doubt, the progress has continued, and the important thing now is to make sure that we don't slip backwards over the next few seasons as well.
It's an interesting one. I'll bring it around to you, John. I mean, from your perspective, we've scored 45 goals in those 14 successive home wins at White Hart Lane, an average of 3.2 goals per game. I mean, the form at the Lane, it's electric, isn't it?
It has been, it's been the backbone of our success. I mean, I think we got something like 42 points so far from our home games. I mean, which on its own would have secured, saved us from relegation. We would have had to play an away game. But, I mean, again, to kind of put it into sort of more of a kind of perspective, I mean, yes, we've got kind of Christian Eriksen is back in the goals, though it would be nice if he could, if his free kick, his dead ball skills still seem to have deserted him. His free kicks are pretty hopeless, as are his corners. And I mean, I do worry slightly that the strength in depth still isn't there. I mean, of the 4 players we brought in, Wanyama has been an undoubted success, but Moussa Sissoko has been a disaster. That's 30 million quid's worth disaster. George Kevin Nkudu, well, he's had his sort of odd moments off the bench, but he's hardly been someone you would really turn to. And Vincent Janssen has also really struggled. He's scored 1 goal from open play, and that's sort of when we're 5-0 up against Millwall in the FA Cup. So whatever we're getting right, there is still a lot more to improve on if we're to kind of, having a hit rate of sort of 1 in 4, buying 4 players and only one of them actually being good enough to become an integral part of the squad just isn't good enough.
And I mean, you mentioned there, John, very quickly, Vincent Janssen. What do you think the future holds for him? Because obviously with Harry Kane, he's back.
Oh yeah, I mean, we would have been 1-0 up in 10 minutes, I think, if Janssen I did a nice turn early on and then was sort of blocked by Gomez, but I think Kane would have scored that. And then he missed an absolute sitter he managed to, from 2 yards out, to hit the bar. And I can't imagine Kane doing that. I would back Kane to score that goal. Almost anybody in the side to score that goal, to be honest. So he runs around, he shows a lot of effort, and we kind of love him for that because he's got a kind of work ethic. He doesn't feel like he's a moody player, and so the Spurs fans never like sort of players that have a sulk. But I don't know. My guess is that we'll give him 1 more season to adjust. But whether he turns out to be another sort of Roberto Soldado who sort of never really makes it and gets sort of shoveled out after 2 years, I don't know. But I think he'll probably get another year.
What do you think, Seb? Coming to you. Has he got a future at the club? I mean, Kane back fit now. You'd think, really, Harry Kane, he'd probably start next week versus Bournemouth. Wouldn't you think that?
Yeah, I'd have thought so. I mean, I think he needs minutes before the Cup semi-final. Vincent Janssen, honestly, Ricky, I can't get over the shape of his body. It's very, very strange. It's almost like his legs aren't long enough and his body is too long.
Right.
It's just, he doesn't look like. I think one of the reasons a lot of fans like him, I mean, apart from the fact that, as John said, he puts in a lot of effort, is that he looks like someone you might play against on a Sunday morning. He doesn't he's sort of in during the week he's an electrician or something, and I don't know, he doesn't like the modern footballer is quite a sort of an airbrushed ideal. Yeah, he's sort of, it's like they've been chiseled out of granite.
That was what was so weird about the Watford game, because so many of the Watford players looked like big units.
Yeah, they did. They did
look like athletes. They again look like people you'd play against on Hackney Marshes.
I wonder. I think Pochettino seems to like Janssen. I know he had. He very publicly criticised him earlier in the season purely as it's kind of almost like a Mourinhoism, isn't it? That you criticise a player publicly as a means of sending a message.
Yeah. To
get a reaction, of course. And after Swansea, he was glowing generally, but he was very happy with what Janssen did, and particularly the moment which led to Son's goal. And I think that I'm aware of what I'm about to say and how it's going to sound like a kind of. I just hear myself defending Roberto Soldado when I say things like this, but the chance he missed on Saturday, the first one, it's a little bit harder than people have made out. I think, yes, should still score. Of course he should. But when a ball comes through that many bodies and that many legs have had a swing at it, I think you have to give a player who hasn't scored a lot of goals a little bit of leeway and say, all right, you got to score, but this is not immortalised on YouTube territory.
Do you think, I have to ask you this, Seb, do you think if the game finished 0-0, we'd be saying the same thing? Do you think
the game didn't finish 0-0?
No, it didn't.
I don't have to answer it. We won 4-0.
That's a very good answer. Great answer. I love that. That's a fantastic answer. Bringing it back round to you, Jace. Mauricio Pochettino, he's amounted now 202 points from 107 games in charge of Spurs, roughly averaging 2 points per game. That's incredible, isn't it?
It's even more astonishing if you think the first year of that, when he's probably below that ratio, he was trying to sort a side out that had Vlad Kirikez and Yunis Kabul in it. So I don't know what the stat is over the past 2 seasons, but I think you almost have to. Well, I suppose the record books can't delete that first season, but I would imagine his graph has gone significantly upwards. That side had Adebayor and Soldados and Paulinhos and people like that in it.
Fazio.
God, dear.
Carl Norton.
Imagine that as the back.
Carl Norton was actually quite good for Swansea against us.
You know, I mean, that back three of Fazio, Vlad and Kabul compared to Dier, Toby and Jan. I mean, it's astonishing, isn't it?
Chalk and cheese. It's unbelievable.
He's done a fantastic job. You know, the thing we're now in is we hear the criticism now of it's time to win a trophy or to take us to that next level. I think, you know, it's one thing to say that. There's still things that have to go his way. You've still got to have that proper squad investment. You've still got to give him the players that perhaps he wants and things like that for him to be able to go to that next level. And I find some of the criticisms from outside Tottenham now, in amongst journalists, of saying, well, you know, until he delivers a trophy, he's a poor manager, and yet they're the ones that are full of praise for other managers that, you know, the likes of Klopp and Guardiola and things that, okay, they've delivered trophies at other clubs, but dear oh dear, the circumstances to deliver trophies for Bayern Munich and Barcelona are a hell of a lot different than they are for Tottenham Hotspur. So, you know, I think it's time he was treated on the same level or the same level of respect with those people, and you know, that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, I also think that it's a question of trying to keep this. It's not about necessarily adding to the squad, because adding to the squad is always quite tricky. I mean, this is where I think Vincent Janssen gets another season, is because if you're a really good striker, would you come to a club where you know that Harry Kane is going to play unless he's injured? Probably not. So you need someone who is prepared to be on the subs bench. But it is now a question of keeping the squad together. Of paying Vertonghen, Alderweireld, Dembele, Kane, Dele Alli, Eriksson, the kind of money that they would get at other clubs.
I mean, I think that you made a great point there, John. Coming to you in on that point, I think the only real players, the only two I can think of that we haven't tied down at the moment is Eric Lamela and is Toby Alderweireld. Now, from what we hear is ongoing, is that Toby Alderweireld's contract is being sorted out. Eric Lamela, that's obviously another story in itself. We'll wait to see if he's a Spurs player next season. But like John has just said there, how crucial is it that we try and keep this squad together? Because to be fair, if you look at last season, I mean, finishing third, this season you would like to think we're close to second. We can't be far away from the league itself, can we, if we keep this squad together?
No, I totally agree, Rick. And I think that if it gets to the stage where we're struggling to pay Toby Alderweireld what he thinks he's worth, then I think we should all have a collection for him on the last game of the season, because you know, I genuinely believe, and this is going to sound controversial, he's up there with Ledley King as far as I'm concerned.
I was going to say best.
Absolutely.
Best since Ledley, isn't he?
I think him and Vertonghen are the best central defensive pair in the country, I think.
And I would say they were probably I would say collectively they were better than King and Dawson.
Oh yeah,
and they're better footballers. I think they've got better brains. I got the impression that with Dawson, a lot of his defending was instinctive, whereas King, I often got the impression he had to think for both of them.
Vertonghen actually also looks like he's quietly doing a PhD in sort of astrophysics on the side, I think. I
agree, totally agree.
Oh, it's brilliant.
But it's not just the wages of those top players you have to get right. We've seen it lately with Ben Davies' new contract. Kieran Trippier is a prime example. If you're going to pay Kieran Trippier, which I think he's around about the £30,000 a year mark, and he started 3 Premier League games, and we're rightly waxing lyrical about the impact he's had when Carl Walker's not there. So you've got to either find a way that Kieran Trippier plays more games, or you've got to significantly give him a reason to stay there and put up with only 3 games. And you know, when that was done with Ben Davies's, we had everybody jumping straight on the backs and then saying, well, why has Ben Davies got a new contract? And you know, you can't have it both ways. If you want to keep that really strong squad, you've got to give them the rewards that stop them wanting moves elsewhere. And Kieran Trippier has probably done enough to warrant a move to. I mean, you look at Everton, who've just lost Seamus Coleman for a year.
That's the recent rumour, isn't it? Yeah, is the rumour tonight.
Well, there you go. Or even, you know, even Manchester City, who've got Sanya and people like that. Now, I'm not saying they'd want Kieran Trippier, but didn't he was at Manchester City, I think, as a youth kid, wasn't he? Who's to say Manchester City wouldn't come in and say, look, I'll tell you what, Kieran Trippier, you can come here and you can play 25 games a season and we will pay you 70 grand a week. And that's the problem that you're up against, even with those lower level players.
Yeah, I'll bring it to you, Seb. It's such a fine, like Jason just said there, it's such a fine balance, isn't it, between trying to keep the squad harmony but also looking to improve the squad. It's such a fine line, isn't it, because we've arguably got one of the best 11s in the country. Harry Kane is coming back. but it's a very, very difficult job in that summer to try and improve the first 11 because of how good it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Also, Ricky, I think this is one of the understated costs of Tottenham's financial position, in the sense that it's hard enough to put a competitive first 11 on the field, because you just can't compete. I mean, the Sadio Mane situation from last summer. It's very difficult to compete for those kind of players. But also, whereas a Chelsea or a Manchester City can afford to have 60, 70 grand a week players sitting on their bench, Tottenham really can't have that. It just the wage structure doesn't really exist to allow that. And so, anytime someone comes in, anytime a second tier player exudes any kind of promise, as Trippier has done, they become attractive to kind of the middle of the league who will pay them as a starter. I think though the answer there is not necessarily always. I'm not using Kieran Trippier as an example, but it's not always to kind of keep restocking that second rung. It's kind of, that's where the emphasis on something like the academy comes in. Yep. That's where you need a Harry Winks this season to come through, because you fill in your gaps as they develop. Because as someone offering a player like Trippier a lot of money, it's kind of one of those footballing inevitabilities, which kind of it's a little bit pointless for us to worry about, because ultimately there's not much we can do about it as a club. But yeah, no, I mean, the hope is, if that was to happen, then you got a Kyle Walker-Peters who can come in and play in that position, or somebody else that we haven't even heard of from the academy doing the same. It's tricky, but I suppose that's kind of, until the new stadium is built and the benefits are felt from having it there, that's kind of the reality.
It is indeed. It really is fascinating to see what Maurizio will do in the summer. And let's do so. Let's take some questions, guys. What we're going to do, we're going to go for a very quick break, and then we're going to take a host of questions for tonight's panel. Hi guys, welcome back to the e-Spurs podcast. As always, we ask you to get your questions into us on a weekly basis. You can do that very easily by tweeting our e-Spurs Twitter account of @e_Spurs, leaving your question with the hashtag at the end of e-SpursPod. Now, as always, guys, you get into us in your droves, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can and try and answer them. But just a reminder that any questions that don't get answered in the show, Jason very kindly does answer the questions on the e-Spurs official website of www.e-spurs.com. So like I say, you can find any answers to your questions on there. Let's start off tonight. Let's go to you first, Ian. We've got a question here from Damien McCall, @Damien McCall, and I think this is a subject we've touched upon tonight already, but he says, if Poch sticks with 4 at the back, should Wanyama be benched for Dier? I know we've discussed this subject a lot tonight. Very quickly, yes or no, what do you think on that one?
Depends who the opposition is.
Okay. And
I just think that if you need that screen, then I think Wanyama is a slightly more defensive-minded player. If you want somebody that helps that you move the ball quicker and can pick a pass, then it has to be Dier.
Let's go round to you, John. We've got a question here from Dele Alli @Janiadlas. I hope I pronounced that name right again. Thank you for getting again into the show this week. John, the question from Dele Alli this week is, our recruitment so far has been poor, like you've alluded to, John. Sevilla's sporting director, Monchi, who has left Seville and is now available, should Spurs be looking at him as a replacement for Mitchell? What do you think?
Again, I don't know enough about Monchi to know his track record on being able to kind of spot talent, to be able to make a call on that. I mean, my feeling is that Spurs should have their own kind of network of knowing what's out there, and that Pochettino should have the final say.
I think the thing to bear in mind, because he's one of those voguing names which appears any time an English club needs a director of football. the thing that has to be remembered about him is that he operates in a very different market to the one that English football now inhabits, in the sense that English Premier League has so much money that they are essentially like all the clubs are really predators in the transfer market. At Sevilla, his success has come from signing the player that doesn't necessarily come with a reputation and who isn't immediately an option for the first team. And so I don't know. I don't think anyone could say confidently that he could come into a club like Tottenham or any other club in the Premier League's top 10 and replicate what he's done in Spain. And also, by his own admittance, he's someone that comes with an absolutely enormous entourage of scouts. It goes back to the kind of the Juande Ramos problem. Like the thing that Daniel Levy never seemed to realise was that, like, Juande Ramos did achieve things at Sevilla, but he didn't really seem to take into account why he achieved them and the other people behind that success. He kind of transplanted a very small element of what would have been at Sevilla, and obviously, it didn't not work. It was a catastrophe. And that's not to say that Monchi would be, but that's, I don't know, you have to proceed with care with that argument, I think. He's also been scouting players and buying players for future development in La Liga. Yeah. And we know that's entirely different to the Premier League, and a great example of that. And Monty's been there, I think, 16 years, hasn't he? So he's well into that system. But imagine if Monty turned up at Tottenham and said, "I'm going to bring Steven and Nzonzi in." What would the reaction be if we wanted to bring Nzonzi in? And don't get me wrong, Nzonzi's done an absolutely fantastic job for Seville. But you're right, he's buying for a different market in a totally different league with different money. And it may work or it may not work. But with any director of football or scout, we see it all the time. Some transfers work out, some become a flop, and some you take a risk on and they develop 2 years after they've left your club. And I'm yet to find a single person that gets it right 100% of the time. Yeah, spot on. Exactly that. Sorry, chaps, I just had to interrupt this because Johan Kabay has just scored an absolute stunner and Palace are 2 up! I heard a roar. Come on! 2 up! I heard a roar. Sorry, this will either get left in or edited out depending on how this Arsenal game finishes. No, you can't edit that out. No. Unbelievable. What a goal he's just scored. Absolute stormer, 2-0. Half hour to go. Right, okay. Trying to get back to the podcast, trying to keep it sane. Okay.
Just to put it into perspective, haven't we got to go to Palace?
I think we have.
Yeah, we have. At the end of the month, I'm going.
Just don't be careful, chaps.
Wilfred Zaha, second assist of the night. We've got to get this guy. His second assist against Arsenal. Got to sign him up.
Who needs Monchi? The e-Spurs podcast have spoken.
Dear, oh dear. Let's go around to you, John. We've got a question here, John, from Daniel Lint, and who says, with Kane back, will Poch bench Son again? Surely not considering the form he's in. If not, what position do you think he'll end up on?
I think Kane has to play, and that Son will go back to being an impact sub. That's just my take on it. That's where I think he's best. I agree with what Seb was saying earlier.
And you're right. I mean, Kane will obviously comes into the side, and so the only way to fit Son in is going 4-2-3-1. The only thing is, I hear about Son being an impact player. He's got 18 goals this season, 15 of which have come when he started the game, which included 2 at Stoke away, 2 at Borough away, the rescue with Wickham, the hat-trick v Millwall, and the 2 Saturday. So, he's actually only got 3 off the bench and 15 when he started. And I think that sums up that when he starts a series of games and gets into a rhythm, you see the Son that you're starting to see now. But I accept the fact that if Kane plays and we want to play 3-4-3, then he has to drop to the bench. But it's not quite as clear cut to say he makes a big impact off the bench.
I say that's a great question because I say again, Neil McClern's got in touch here. Similar thing with Son. He says with the form Son is in, should he be starting games or should he be an impact sub? I mean, and coming to you, Seb, it's just a tricky one, isn't it? Because you don't want to take him out the side because he's on a great run of form. But Harry Kane, we just know what he can bring to this side, can't we? In terms of his work rate, energy, and the goals. Yeah, I mean, look, there's no easy way of putting this, and there's no way of making this choice without it seeming like Son's being discarded, but. Like an on-form Harry Kane is worth so much more to Tottenham over the rest of the season. It's not really even that much of a debate, I don't think, because you're not going to jettison either Ali or Eriksen behind him, and it's the nature of the team. Kane traditionally is someone that when he comes back from injury doesn't necessarily step onto the pitch and reclaim whatever form he was in when he got hurt. He needs a game or two, and he has to start on Saturday, and he will. It's tough on Son, but that is the nature of team football. Just on that one really quickly, if that's the way you go, and as I say, I think if we play 3-4-3, which is my preference, then Kane has to play. But in which case, who comes on first, Son or Janssen? Another good question. I think Son, because I think it works with the same principle in that, like, if substitution is being made with the aim of chasing a game or getting a goal. You can't bring Kane off in that situation. You got to go with a goal threat. Like, you just can't take goals off the pitch in that situation. And I like what Janssen's done in patches, and I think that, like, even if he's not scoring goals, I know it's a bit of a Soldado argument, but he is still a value. And also, he's a value in protecting a lead as well, because I think we've seen a couple of times at White Hart Lane when
there's a 1-goal lead to defend and team needs an outlet. But if you're chasing a game, it always has to be Son in that situation.
I think as well, just on Sonny, I mean, Dele Alli and his 18 goals that he's got this season is outstanding. And yet there's Heung-min Son with 18 goals as well as a backup player. And, when I hear about people saying we need game changers, we need this in our squad, we need that in our squad, there's a guy there with 18 goals to his name. I mean, as we rave about Ali's 18 and Harry Kane's on about, 24? Is it 24 for the season, something like that? Heung-min Son has 18 goals. I mean, that is, and there were people at the start of the season said, why did we get rid of Chadley? It's amazing.
And I speak as someone that actually wanted Son to leave in the last summer. And the funny thing is that I can hear the statistics and I can see him score as many goals as he has this season. And for whatever reason, I'm still not completely sold on what he is as a player, because Chadley's an interesting one, because Chadley scored goals despite never really playing very well. I mean, the amount of times that he's scoring games where he'd been anonymous or he'd been lazy or, he'd done very little. Son isn't quite like that, but there are so many times where you think where he scores sort of 5 or 10 minutes after you've been begging Pochettino to take him off.
Yeah.
Which is a really weird way. So he's a very, very hard player to evaluate, and it's hard.
Everything he does is positive. His decision making, we know, is appalling sometimes. So often he gets the decision wrong. But what I like about him is that when he makes, even when he gets something wrong, he's trying to do something positive. He won't get the ball and just think, God, I'm not going to take my fullback on. I'll give it back to Carl Walker with a 3-yard pass and do the safe thing and impress all the people at Opta with yet another successful pass. He'll try and go past his man, and he might get it wrong, and he might go past him and balloon his cross. But at least everything that he does has a positive element to his game, and that's what I like about him.
He's got balls as a player. I mean, he sort of, like, when he's got when he's in possession, like, he isn't afraid to, on either foot, take a shot on from 25, 30 yards. And I do like that, and I do think that's a quality that can always bring goals from somewhere, even in a situation where a team isn't playing very well. But yeah, I don't know. I'm retiring from the Son argument generally. I've said so much already. Every time he scores, I get people chirping at me on Twitter. So I'm gonna retire. You lot, you can discuss it from here on.
Okay. Can I put in a quick defence of Chadley?
Please do.
Because for me, the argument wasn't whether we should get rid of Son or Chadley. It's why did we get rid of Chadley to bring in Sissoko?
Yeah, that's spot on, John. Yeah, absolutely.
Because we spent 30 million quid, supposedly. I mean, I'm sure some of it was the money that we were owed for Townsend that Newcastle hadn't paid us. But we brought in a player who has contributed no goals and not a great deal of effort or spirit for someone who could be relied on to score 6 or 7 goals a season. And it just seems nuts. And we flogged him for 13 mil or something to West Brom.
I think the logic behind Sissoko was a need, and theoretical need, because I know how this has panned out. The need for like a dynamic player and for someone with some pace, someone that could move. Sorry for the kind of the Brendan Rodgersism, but they sort of move vertically up the pitch. He hasn't done any of those things. And it's a transfer that I hated with every fibre of myself from the moment it happened. But I don't know, Chadley, the Sissoko who played for France, or who sort of fleetingly played for France in the European Championship, he is of more value than Chadley, I think.
No, I agree. But in terms
I think that's a myth, John. The player, I don't think that player really exists, actually. I mean, I just think it's sort of illusion.
It was sort of FIFA 2017, man.
Yeah, exactly. It was that darkens my mood, that transfer.
No problem. Chaps, I'm going to try and bring back around to the question. We've still got quite a few to get through. Let's go to this one. Let's go to you, Jace. We've got a question here from Carl Higgins at Carl_H88. He says, what team would you like to see against Bournemouth? Would you rotate anybody ahead of the FA Cup tie against Chelsea?
I think the side for me would be as the Watford lineup, with the exception that Kane comes in for Janssen. I don't think there's a need to rotate anyone, and obviously having got to 4-0 up so often of late, if we get to that situation again, I might whip Eriksen, Alli and Kane off with 20 minutes, but No, I wouldn't be leaving anyone out, and I'd keep Dier in midfield and play 4-2-3-1 on Saturday.
Okay, fair enough. Next question of the night goes to you, Ian. This is from Lee Rainbow, who says, player of the season so far. He says Dele Alli. I mean, it's quite a lot of people, isn't it, in contention. Who would you go for personally yourself?
How'd you nail that down to just one?
I know.
Do you know what? I know he's been out for a bit. I want to say Vertonghen.
What about you, chaps? Very quick on that. Seb?
Danny Rose.
Danny Rose. John?
Toby Alderweireld.
There you go. And Jace, finally to you?
Dele Alli.
But he's been absolutely phenomenal this season. I would also, I think I would go alongside Dele Alli, but my God, Wanyama. We forget Wanyama, what season he's had.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Very fair. Yeah,
it's just Danny Rose again, prior to his injury. Just unbelievable team at the moment. Everybody is stepping up. Guys, I have to apologise. We won't get through all listener questions this week. As always, Jason will be on the website to answer them. I want to go on to Bournemouth. Bringing it on to you, John, what do you make of that Bournemouth game? Because I think really Bournemouth, they look like they're going to be free from relegation. Similar to Watford, they're in a position where they can come to White Hart Lane, play their football and not really be under pressure. Is that a worry? Is this a game we could potentially slip up in?
As a Spurs fan, you know there's no game that you can't potentially slip up in. But I am feeling quite confident. I think that, as it was being alluded to, Bournemouth tend to play quite open, expansive football. Clearly, and they got sort of ripped apart by Chelsea. And I think that Spurs could do the same to them quite easily if they come with that frame of mind to sort of give us a game. I mean, the ones we kind of struggle with are where teams sort of put 10 players behind the ball. We sometimes, I think, it's quite a bit slow and to break teams down. And I mean, we get there in the end, and fair play to Poch for that. We don't seem to we miss a spark sometimes. It sometimes feels like there's, players are waiting for somebody else to provide the bit of magic rather than take the game by the scruff of the neck themselves.
It's going to be a tricky game. Seb, coming to you, what do you make of that game against Bournemouth?
It's hard. It's hard, Ricky, because it's going to depend on what kind of Bournemouth turn up. I mean, even at their best, they're a little bit fragile. And the thing about Eddie Howe that we touched on earlier is that he's a really good coach when his team have the ball. But off of it, his players really don't work hard enough to win it back. And they have that back line. Their Bournemouth's defence is effectively 4 blokes. I mean, they're just 4 normal guys that they call things like Steve Cook and They don't work hard enough to protect those defenders. So, when I'm not picking on an Arsenal player, but when Jack Wilshere, when his 25-yard pass gets intercepted or he loses possession, he has this habit of kind of lolloping back in pursuit of the play. If you watch Chelsea's first goal from the weekend, you'll see that. The second goal from the weekend, you'll see that pretty much. Play with the right attitude, and this is one of those that could be done by half-time, hopefully. But they're not a team that you can allow to play, though. You can't let them start passing the ball because they are since they moved clear of relegation, they've just got a little bit more confidence to be progressive. And Josh King's scoring a lot of goals. Afobe is getting chances. They're not a walkover, but they're someone who should be stamped out early if possible. Basically.
Yeah. Well, and Seb, thanks for reminding me about. I've forgotten we had the pleasure of Jack Wilshere coming back to.
Oh yes, of course, we can't forget that.
He'll be given an absolutely miserable time every time he gets on the ball, and he will deserve every second of it.
You know what, John? It's only if he gets into the starting lineup because he's not a shoo-in for that team. He spent a little bit of time on the bench recently. He's only really recently been promoted back to.
Dear. I really hope he plays.
It kind of makes you want Dier and Wanyama in midfield.
It does. It really does. Let's do predictions, guys, for this one. I want to quickly touch upon the FA Cup game, so I want to try and get predictions done on this one. Let's go very quickly around the table. Jace, to you, prediction first for the game against Bournemouth?
Bournemouth game, I'll go 2-0 Tottenham.
2-0 Tottenham. Ian?
I go 2-1 Tottenham. I just recall the game at the Vitality earlier on in the season. I think we got a draw, didn't we? Was it 0-0?
0-0.
And it was a tough old match. It was a tough old match, and I think that they made us work hard. So I think that they will make us work hard again. But then I thought Watford would provide a sterner challenge, so I'll stick with me 2-1.
And to you, John, very quickly, your prediction on this one?
I'm going to go more upbeat. I'm going to go 3-0 because I think if we get one, we'll get a couple more because I think it's always the first goal you worry about with Spurs. And once we got the first goal, we seem to have the knack of being able to score at will pretty much afterwards until we take our foot off the pedal, like as we did against Bournemouth and Watford in the second half. So I think I go 3-0.
And finally, to you, Seb.
I'll take 2-0. I'll take 2-0 after an hour, and then a couple of players coming off in preparation for the next week, and then a bit of a non-event for the last half an hour.
How can anyone say that we're not too greedy, are we? That's fair enough. We're not greedy. Let's stick with you, Seb, very quickly. FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea. I think we have to, as you guys are here, we have to have a quick look at this one. How big is this for Spurs, this FA Cup, in your opinion?
I think it's huge. I look at it more as from a fan's perspective, in the sense that it's just an occasion I'm really, really looking forward to. I'm not sure I totally buy into the kind of the magical value of winning a trophy and then that kind of translating into lots of other little trophies further down the line, because history doesn't necessarily support that. But I, for the sake of going to Wembley, knocking over a rival, I mean, it's a massive game just because of that occasion. Go there, be the best you can be in a venue where the whole world is watching, and that's worth something. That's worth as much as whatever happens in a potential final, in my opinion.
Yeah, and coming to you, John, there's been a lot of talk about Spurs, the improvement in the last couple of seasons under Pochettino, but everyone's saying, no, great improvement, but they need to start winning trophies. Just how imperative for you is this FA Cup? Is it a chance to really make a statement?
I feel about the same way about Seb. I mean, it's been too long since we've won. I mean, we haven't won an FA Cup for over 25 years now, and it kind of feels about time. But I kind of... the closer it gets, the more I begin to dread it. I have this sort of horrible feeling that it's all going to go tits up somehow. I really hope it doesn't, but I can't face leaving Wembley again, walking up Empire Way, having lost another game there. I know that if we do get an early goal, I'll just be spending the rest of the match wishing for the West referee to blow the final whistle.
It's not a great journey home, that, when you lose. Unfortunately, we've experienced that too many times in the last year or so. Ian, to you very quickly. I know we've spoken a lot about this. As we come towards this game, your feelings, I mean, have they changed at all, or are you still? I think you're still very much saying we need this trophy, don't we? We need to make this statement.
Well, I'm going to answer this with my tongue firmly in my cheek. It's a done deal, the semi-final, because I've made the decision that I'm not going to go. So, I think I've been the bad.
I've taken one for the team.
I've taken one for the team because I've seen Chelsea twice at Wembley, and I think -7 +1 is the goal difference. So.
Oh, you were there for the last semi-final, the 5-1.
Oh, yes.
That was a horrible afternoon, wasn't
it? And you talking about that walk down Empire Way afterwards, that was the most horrible feeling that I've ever experienced. So I've decided that me and my son are going to go over and watch a Bundesliga game on the 22nd. So as I said, it's a done deal, chaps. You can stake your houses and your mortgages and any money you like on it that we're going to come away from Wembley with a win against Chelsea. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, will you promise to miss the final too?
Well, I've already been told that by my mates because they've said, you do realise, Ian, if we beat Chelsea, you can't come to the final. And I said, you know what? I'll take that every day of the week if it means we win the final.
There you go.
So there you go.
This FA Cup game, Jace, as we grow closer to it.
I'm not even going to worry about it yet. Let's just get Bournemouth out of the way, get those 3 points on the board, get them, and then we'll get the excitement for a semi-final next week. Totally. Sorry, mate, boring answer, but that's the way it has to be.
There you go. Jason, the diplomat as ever, only looking to the next game. Can't blame him. Guys, hopefully, like I say, we'll be back after the Bournemouth game. John, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
No, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good. I hope you've enjoyed it. And Seb, thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, Ricky. Anytime.
And Jason, Ian, thank you guys as always.
No problem, mate.
Good. Welcome.
And guys, we'll be back after the Bournemouth game, hopefully reviewing another win at White Hart Lane and previewing the massive game to come. Wembley, Chelsea. We're going to be there. Thank you so much. And as always, come on you Spurs!